Today we're going to talk about 10 common backyard birds that everyone should know, with tips on how to identify them, what their vocalizations sound like, and even what they like to eat in your backyard. So you may have seen a bunch of these before and not known what they are, so it's great for beginners, or if you just want a refresher on some backyard birds or to watch an interesting presentation. So let's start with the first bird on our list. That is the house sparrow, and this is one of the most common birds that you'll see in your backyard because they live in so many different places and they love living in urban areas. So if you walk outside and see a little brown bird, it is likely a house sparrow. There are other sparrows that look similar, but this is one of the most common ones, and they make these little chipping noises. They don't actually have a true song. So this was a bird that we brought over from Europe at some point, and they really took over. They're very aggressive. A lot of people think they're just really cute, but they will kill other birds that are trying to nest, such as bluebirds. So their aggression can get to a lot of people, and it's kind of like you think they're really cute until you see them doing something really aggressive, and then it may change your perspective of them. But both males and females are brown. The males have a little more coloration on the face. Females are a little more cream colored with some different lighter markings on the face. And they can be confused with other sparrows, but normally these are the most common ones you'll see in urban areas. They'll come to the feeder, eat below the feeder. They'll kind of just eat whatever you put out, more or less, so they're not too picky. Very adaptable bird. Unfortunately, it is a non-native and even invasive species at this point. So let's move on to number 2. We have the American robin, which is actually the state bird of Wisconsin. And a lot of people think of robins as harbingers of spring, but they will actually stay year-round in some places. They have the iconic reddish-orange stomach with a grayish-brown back. Males have a little darker coloration on the head. Females are a little bit lighter. And they'll feed on the ground. They'll sit up in trees. They really like fruit, mealworms. They'll go look for worms on the soil as well. As far as vocalizations go, they're one of the earliest birds to sing in the morning, and they make a lot of high whistles, and you might be familiar with this sound. They can be found all throughout North America, so very common bird and a pretty iconic species. Let's move on to number 3. The northern cardinal. And this is a bird that is mostly found in the eastern United States. Sometimes they'll stray out of their range, but unfortunately our friends in the West normally don't get to experience the vibrant northern cardinal. Males are bright red, have a little bit of black. Females are very pretty in their own right. They're brownish tan with a little bit of red accents. They really love sunflower seeds, but they'll eat a variety of different things. They have that really thick bill, so they can crush a lot of different stuff. And as far as vocalizations go, they have a couple different ones. They make a what cheer, 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 cheer. As well as a purdy, 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 purdy. So they do sound a little different depending on where you are too. So cardinals in the north, I feel like, sound slightly different than cardinals in the south. A lot of different vocalizations, but that's really a fan favorite, the northern cardinal. Moving on to number 4, the blue jay. They're found in mostly the central and eastern United States, but you do have other species of jays in the west that you might also see. But we'll start with the blue jay. They're pretty large, very spunky. They'll move around quite a bit. They love peanuts. They're pretty unmistakable, blue, gray, white, with a crest, a long tail, and they have a lot of personality. Some people love blue jays, others think they can be a little bit of a bully, so it depends on who you are, what you think of them, and they make the classic JJJ sound. But they have a lot of different vocalizations, and their repertoire is pretty extensive. They'll even imitate red-tailed hawks or other species to get animals off the feeder. They think there's a predator, and then they'll come in and be able to eat. So that's a pretty cool thing that jays can do, and very much a fan favorite for some people. Now in the West, you have other types of jays you might see in the backyard, such as California scrub jays, Woodhouse's scrub jays, or maybe even Steller's jays. So kind of anywhere in the US, you probably have some species of jay hanging around. Now let's move on to number 5. We have the chickadee, and I left a specific species of chickadee off because there's so many different kinds. So in the Northeast, you have the black-capped chickadee. They're very little birds with a lot of personality. Gray, black, and white, and they're known for being really friendly. So they'll kind of come up to you, see what you're doing, make their vocalizations. And then in the southeast, you have the Carolina chickadee, which looks very similar to the blackcaps. And then in the west, you have a bunch of different kinds of chickadees, such as chestnut-backed chickadees, Mexican chickadee, mountain chickadee. So depending on where you are, there's probably some species of chickadee hanging around in that area. As far as the chickadees in the east, they make a springtime call, which some people think sounds like cheeseburger or hey, sweetie. There's a lot of different mnemonic devices you can have for that one. But they also make a chickadee-dee-dee, and those are the two that you'll normally hear a lot. At the feeder, they really love black oil sunflower seeds, but they'll eat a lot of different stuff, and they're a very common and very fun and cute bird. Let's move on to number 6. We have the mourning dove, and this is a real fan favorite for a lot of people. Some people actually don't like them, which was surprising, but they are a medium-sized dove, tan in coloration, a little bit of iridescence on the side of the neck, which is really pretty if it hits in the right light, but they're known for their vocalization, their cooing noise. And for a lot of people, it reminds them of summer days playing outside as a kid, so it's very nostalgic. If they hear it, it brings them back to their childhood. And they say, oh, I thought these were extinct. And it's like, no, you just haven't gone outside and chilled out in a while. So maybe that's the sign that we should all be going outside and enjoying our lives a little bit more. But they're a very iconic backyard bird, and their vocalization is a lot of people's favorite bird sound. They like to eat millet, cracked corn, and a lot of other stuff in the seed mix. They're not too picky, and sometimes they can be a little bit aggressive at feeders, mostly just because of their size. They're kind of bigger than some other birds, so that's why some people don't necessarily like having them take over a feeder. But in general, they're a really pretty peaceful, really iconic sounding species. And in other parts of the US, you might have different dove species like the Eurasian collared dove, a little bit bigger, collar on the back of the neck, or the white-winged dove. So a lot of doves in a lot of different places. But the mourning dove is found everywhere in the United States. Moving on to number 7. We have the downy woodpecker. They're a small, really cute woodpecker species, black and white, small bill. Males have red on the back of their head that the females lack, black and white on the back, and tail feathers. Now, in addition to the downy woodpecker, there's a larger woodpecker species called the hairy that has a larger bill. It's kind of a larger version of the downy with some differences, such as males have 2 red spots on the back of their head instead of 1. There's differences in the amount of white on the edges of the tail feathers, so sometimes it can be hard to tell them apart, but normally size is a really good indicator of which is which. In addition to downies, you might have red-bellied woodpeckers. They're a pretty common one, and a lot of other woodpecker species to look out for, but the downy is found throughout the US. If you have suet out, they really love to come to that. A bunch of woodpeckers do, and they also love peanuts, among other food items. As far as vocalizations, they make a little pick noise, and they also have kind of a whinny. Let's move on to number 8. The European starling, another non-native species. Starlings are black, and they have a really beautiful iridescence if the light hits them, and they're adults, with a yellow bill. Younger starlings are going to look more speckled as kind of that coloration comes in, but they're normally in these big flocks, and they can create these things called murmurations, where it actually looks like they're moving as one object almost. They kind of move at the same time and shift in the sky. So they have these crazy shapes and patterns that they can make, which is really interesting to observe. But they were a species that wasn't native to the US. They were brought over. Now they cause some damage to crops. They can kind of take over feeders if a huge group comes in. So some people aren't a fan of starlings. Their vocalizations are really beautiful, and they can actually mimic other things as well. But they do have some bad consequences as far as our native species, taking habitat, taking nest sites, and, kind of doing some damage to crops. But they are a pretty common backyard bird anywhere in the US. And at the feeders, they'll eat almost anything. Moving on to number 9, we have the House finch. And they actually started as a western species, and then they were kind of brought over to the east, and now they're found throughout the United States. And they were called the Hollywood finch because the males have some red on the chest, and it looks deeper and more bright in the western birds. So if you see a house finch in the east, it might look a little more dull compared to those in the west. So males have that red, otherwise they have a streaked stomach with lighter color and then tan, and the females are all brown with streaks. So they may look similar to the house sparrow, but they'll have a streaked stomach where the house sparrow will not. Their vocalizations are really melodic and very pretty. And they love to eat thistle or Niger seed and also sunflower seeds. At number 10, we have our last bird, the American goldfinch. And this is one that is a lot brighter in the summer compared to the winter. In the winter, they're kind of a dull yellow and black, but then in the summer, they get their breeding plumage and males are bright yellow. So really bright yellow and black bird, males have a little extra black on the forehead. They love Niger and thistle seed, and you may see a bunch of them at your tube feeders if you have those up. And they also make some very melodic noises. So that's our 10. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our other educational resources and subscribe. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Badgerland Birding.